Today, we are taking an extensive look into a life that often seemed to exist in two entirely different universes.
That's a good way to put it.
You have the absurdly quiet corporate landscape he invented, and then you have the profoundly loud, controversial public sphere he later embellished.
Right.
We are tracking the complex biographical trajectory of Scott Adams, the globally syndicated creator of Dilbert, whose life spanned from his birth in 1957 right up until his death on January 13th, 2026.
And our exploration here is really aimed at going far beyond the easily recognizable identity of the iconic cartoonist. Scott Adams's career was defined by these massive, surprising shifts, from a cautious office worker to a globally influential satirist, and then finally to a polarizing political voice.
It's extraordinary. By the peak of his career around the year 2000, his influence was just immense. Dilbert was syndicated in 2,000 newspapers.
Spread across 57 countries and translated into 19 different languages. The scale of that reach, before he ever engaged in political commentary, is just vital context for understanding everything that came later.
Absolutely. The sheer contrast between those quiet corporate beginnings and the globally polarizing figure he became is what makes this story so compelling.
It really is.
We have a detailed biographical snapshot to guide us, which is great. It allows us to follow this journey chronologically and to focus heavily on the unexpected, lesser-known moments that truly defined his evolution and ultimately led to his downfall and his very dramatic final year.
And that's our mission, really, to give you the shortcut to being well-informed on this figure, digging up the nuggets the average person just doesn't know.
So let's start with that foundation. We need to trace the origins of the man who became the definitive voice of white-collar misery.
Okay, let's unpack this journey, starting right at the beginning.
Scott Raymond Adams was born on June 8, 1957, in Windham, New York. A modest, small-town beginning, but one that was characterized by a very early display of academic rigor.
He was a serious student, there's no doubt. He graduated in 1975 from Wyndham Ashland Jewett Central School.
And he did so as the valedictorian.
The valedictorian of his class. It was a small class, mind you, only 39 students. But that detail is important because it speaks to a deep-seated discipline and focus, an early sign of the intense work ethic he would apply to everything later.
And his education really created the perfect dual foundation for his career. He earned a Bachelor of Arts in Economics from Hartwick College in 1979.
So you have the quantitative, systemic viewpoint from that.
Exactly. Then he followed that up with an MBA from the University of California, Berkeley, which he completed in 1986.
And that combination is just crucial. The MBA gave him the structural vocabulary, the jargon, the processes, and the inherent absurdities of the high-level corporate environment.
It was a raw material.
It provided him with the necessary understanding to dissect and dismantle that world, strip by strip, with just surgical precision. He wasn't just drawing cartoons. He was critiquing accepted management philosophy from a position of academic authority.
But the journey into that corporate world was anything but typical or quiet. His professional career began in 1979 at Crocker National Bank in San Francisco.
And this is where we find a detail that is just completely unexpected when you think of a cubicle cartoonist.
He started as a teller.
Yes, and that frontline experience turned traumatic almost immediately.
I mean, unbelievably so.
While working as a teller, he was held up at gunpoint not once, but twice.
Twice, within a terrifying 4-month period.
Think about the psychological impact of that. Sudden, immediate, life-or-death risk. Completely at odds with the typical low-stakes psychological drama of the office.
And that experience, it just completely changed the path he was on. It spurred him to seek security through bureaucracy. He quickly entered a management training program to shift away from the dangers of the front lines and into the perceived safety of internal corporate operations.
It's such a profound shift in perspective. He went from facing actual physical risk to navigating the bureaucratic, strategic, and often absurd risks of management.
Right. For the rest of his career, he would document the daily psychological warfare of the office. But that shift was only triggered by actual physical danger.
He held various managerial roles at the bank, too. He was a computer programmer, a budget analyst, commercial lender, product manager, and supervisor before moving on to Pacific Bell in 1986.
So he was deeply and systematically embedded in that corporate structure, viewing it from all these different managerial angles.
And that embedding, as we said, was the fuel for Dilbert. But there is another crucial layer to his preparation here.
His early investment in self-improvement.
Exactly. Adams repeatedly called the Dale Carnegie training he took life-changing.
That's a huge link, isn't it? Dale Carnegie's philosophy is all about social interaction, communication, confidence, persuasion.
The very skills he would later analyze in his political commentary and attribute to his own personal success.
Precisely. This suggests that the foundational skills of persuasion and focused self-discipline, which defined his later career, were cemented very early on, long before he ever picked up a pen for the strip.
And here's where his intense work ethic truly materialized. While holding down his job at Pacific Bell, this is between 1986 and 1995, he decided he needed a second career.
So he adopts this punishing routine.
Waking up every single day at 4 a.m. to pursue various endeavors, and of all those projects, cartooning was the one that stuck.
It wasn't an artistic whim then. It was a disciplined, focused business venture pursued outside of his 9-to-5.
Absolutely. And the endless personalities and bureaucratic structures he encountered daily at Pacific Bell, that whole environment, became his ultimate source of inspiration.
And the creation process has some great trivia. The character names were developed with help from his corporate environment. The name Dilbert was suggested by his former boss, Mike Goodwin.
And then there's Dogbert, the cynical genius sidekick who became, arguably the strip's most beloved character.
Loosely based on his family's deceased pet beagle, Lucy.
Right, and interestingly, Adams originally considered naming him Dildog before deciding against it.
A wise choice. He launched Dilbert with United Media in 1989, while remarkably still being employed at Pacific Bell.
Imagine the mental compartmentalization required to manage a demanding corporate job while maintaining a daily 4 a.m. cartooning schedule and fielding feedback.
And the initial payoff, it really speaks to the endurance that required. His first monthly royalty check was a deeply modest $368.62.
This is not an instant viral success. It was a slow, sustained climb. The numbers reflect that slow build. 100 newspapers by 1991, but then it quadruples to 400 by 1994, signaling the sudden resonance with the corporate environment.
So what's often cited as the singular key to that rapid, explosive growth is an early innovation he championed.
His use of reader feedback.
Yeah.
This is a critical insight into his business acumen. Adams attributed his success to a strategy that was then revolutionary, including his personal email address directly in the comic panels themselves.
Which allowed for an unprecedented direct channel for feedback and reader suggestions.
In effect, he crowdfunded the satire.
That's a great way to put it.
He outsourced the content generation and made the strip incredibly reactive to the genuine corporate zeitgeist of cubicle life. Readers sent in their most miserable, absurd, or recognizable daily experiences, and Adams immediately incorporated them.
So this gave the comic a raw, authentic, and timely quality that traditional cartoon strips, which relied solely on the cartoonist's own observations, just couldn't match.
Exactly. This feedback loop is what allowed Dilbert to perfectly capture the global office experience.
He didn't become a full-time independent cartoonist until 1995.
Right, that was when Dilbert finally reached syndication in 800 newspapers. He left the corporate cubicle only after the empire he had built outside of it was large enough to be undeniably secure.
And that transition really marks the end of his corporate origin story and the beginning of a period of peak influence, which expanded far beyond cartooning.
Into business philosophy, television, and some very memorable entrepreneurial experiments.
So moving into this period between 1995 and 2015, Adams fully leveraged his cartooning success to transform himself into a business philosopher.
He did. In 1996, he released his first business book, The Dilbert Principle, which codified the concept that had been simmering in his comic strips for years.
And the Dilbert Principle is more than just a funny phrase. It became standard management vocabulary, recognized globally.
It states that the most incompetent employees are systematically promoted and moved into management positions.
The logic being.
The logic behind this, as Adams articulated it, is that in a management role, they can do the least amount of damage to the actual productive work of the company.
It's the ultimate indictment of efficiency and logic in the corporate world. It assumes the systems are so broken that the best strategy for survival is to reward incompetence with promotion just to neutralize the threat.
And you see this absurdity played out constantly in the strip. His recognition during this period was immense. In 1997, he won the National Cartoonist Society's highest honors.
The Rubin Award for Outstanding Cartoonist and Best Newspaper Comic Strip.
It placed him firmly in the pantheon of great American cartoonists.
But he wasn't content just to write about corporate absurdity or draw it. He liked to actively engage in it. One of the most famous anecdotes of this era involves the Mission Impertinent project,
for which he won the Orwell Award in 1998.
This was a genuine piece of performance satire, wasn't it? Testing the depths of management gullibility.
It really was. The CEO of Logitech at the time, Pierluigi Zappacosta, invited Adams to test his own theories,
So Adams went completely undercover.
donning a wig and a false mustache, and impersonated a slick, high-priced management consultant.
And what was the outcome of this corporate espionage?
He successfully manipulated the Logitech management team into adopting a mission statement that he had intentionally designed to be meaningless. He described the statement as so impossibly complicated that it has no real content whatsoever,
Yet the managers were convinced of its profound importance.
simply because an expert presented it with authority. This just exposed the deep-seated flaw in corporate culture, prioritizing jargon and appearance over genuine substance.
To successfully execute such a sophisticated satirical operation and then write about it earned him the Orwell Award for distinguished contributions to honesty and clarity in public language. He was exposing the lie through an elaborate lie of his own making.
And beyond print, his work found its way to primetime. The Dilbert TV series debuted in January 1999 and ran for 2 seasons on UPN.
He served as executive producer, working with veteran writers like Seinfeld's Larry Charles, and the show even earned him a Primetime Emmy Award in 1999.
It did.
So why did a critically recognized show, based on a globally popular strip, get canceled after only 2 seasons?
Adams offered a highly controversial explanation years later.
Yeah.
He claimed that the show was canceled because the UPN networks decided to execute a strategic shift.
Towards exclusively targeting and programming for African-American viewers.
Right. And he asserted that he had been discriminated against because he was white. He stated this claim as recently as 2020, positioning the cancellation itself within the realm of cultural identity politics.
That sets up a fascinating contrast. Adams had perfected the art of observing corporate absurdity, but his next move was to plunge headlong into participating in it, creating the ultimate corporate failure.
The Dilberito.
The Dilberito.
This was a spectacular and frankly bizarre entrepreneurial detour. In 1999, he established Scott Adams Foods, Inc. to market the Dilberito, a vegetarian microwave burrito offered in flavors like Mexican, Indian, barbecue, and garlic and herb.
Sold primarily in health food stores. It sounds like a product straight out of a Dilbert strip, conceived by a manager with noble but fundamentally misguided goals.
And his grand vision for it was enormous. He believed diet is the #1 cause of health-related problems in the world, and he saw the Dilberito as the solution.
He wanted to create a genuinely healthy, mass-appeal food product.
What he termed the blue jeans of food, the goal was to combat malnutrition and poor health through a highly fortified, convenient vegetarian wrap.
An ambitious goal, attempting to solve a major health crisis via a cubicle lunch staple. But the product's legacy is less about health and more about a certain kind of unforgettable physical discomfort.
Indeed. The product failed to gain market traction, leading Adams to sell off the intellectual property in 2003 after investing several years and several $1 million.
And the specific reason for the failure became legendary.
Adams himself provided the unforgettable quote, noting that the combination of mineral fortification, which was hard to disguise the taste of, and the specific veggie and legume content led to, well, digestive issues.
Yes, the source mentions his direct quote about the excessive flatulence caused by the product. That's a detail that truly captures the failure of high-minded corporate engineering meeting biological reality.
And it was echoed by the broader media critique at the time. The New York Times, reviewing the product, noted the burrito could have been designed only by a food technologist or by someone who eats lunch without much thought to taste.
A perfect encapsulation of a well-intentioned, over-engineered corporate product that was just fundamentally unappetizing.
Beyond the business satire and the food experiments, Adams was also actively pursuing deep philosophical and religious questions.
He stated in 2017 that his non-Dilbert books on religion, not the comic strip, would ultimately be his true legacy.
Though we should note he later confessed his conversion to Christ before his death in 2026. But let's discuss the philosophy, specifically his 2001 book, God's Debris.
This work lays out his theory of pandeism.
Right. For those unfamiliar, pandeism is a metaphysical theory that posits God originally blew itself up into a billion pieces, essentially committing divine suicide.
And that explosion is what created the entire universe and everything in it.
Exactly. The concept suggests that the universe itself is God's dispersed debris, constantly working toward recognition. God trying to understand itself again.
That is a remarkably complex and unusual theory to be developed by a best-selling cartoonist. How does it relate to other theological views?
Well, it's a blend of two concepts. Pantheism, the idea that God is the universe, and deism, the idea that God created the universe but does not currently interact with it.
And Adams proposed that the only way to reconcile those concepts is if the creating God became the universe and is now unavailable because it's scattered throughout everything we perceive.
Then in his 2004 book, The Religion War, he took aim directly at theistic belief systems.
In that book, he suggested that followers of traditional theistic religions, specifically citing Christianity and Islam, are subconsciously aware that their core beliefs are false.
And he argued that this subconscious awareness is reflected in their daily, consistent actions that contradict the extreme threats of damnation or retribution outlined in those belief systems.
It shows an active mind, constantly probing these deep, fundamental questions of existence and psychology, even as he was drawing panels about incompetent engineers.
But this period of peak influence and philosophical exploration was also heavily impacted by serious personal health struggles that directly challenged his career.
That's right, and the first major challenge hit his primary tool, his drawing hand.
In the early 1990s, he developed focal dystonia. This is a neurological condition that causes specific muscles, in his case the muscles in his right drawing hand, to spasm involuntarily, making fine motor control incredibly difficult.
For a cartoonist whose entire livelihood depends on the precision of his dominant hand, that sounds devastating.
It was. He managed to temporarily cure it through conditioning, which is a testament to his determination. However, it returned in late 2004, severely limiting his ability to draw for extended periods.
This forced a massive adaptation in his process.
It did. By 2014, he began relying heavily on the graphics tablet, and later, out of necessity, he eventually taught himself to draw using his non-dominant left hand.
And he also suffered from a vocal cord condition, which impacted his ability to communicate verbally, which became crucial later in his life when he transitioned into video commentary.
He was diagnosed with spasmodic dysphonia, an abnormality in the vocal cords that causes involuntary spasms and breaks in speech. In July 2008, he underwent surgery to address this, involving the rerouting of nerve connections to his vocal cords.
He reported the surgery was successful, achieving new levels of functionality in his voice. These struggles just forced persistence and innovation.
Which brings us back to the technique he championed, the use of affirmations, which he credited with significant professional and academic success.
This is a fascinating biographical nugget because it directly connects to his later philosophy of persuasion.
Adams claimed to be a trained hypnotist and had profound faith in the power of focused, repetitive intent. He attributed many major achievements, including scoring in the 94th percentile on a difficult business school exam and the spectacular success of Dilbert, to this mental technique.
And what was his specific method?
It was simple, yet highly disciplined. He would picture exactly what he wanted to achieve, and then write it down on a piece of paper exactly 15 times every day.
And it's important to note the depth of his belief in this practice.
He even incorporated this exact technique into a 1989 Dilbert strip, with Dogbert using affirmations to achieve his own cynical goals. This belief that you could literally write your reality into existence set the stage for his next major transformation.
And this philosophy of reality manipulation and persuasion became central to his public identity, pivoting him sharply from a universally accepted corporate satirist to a highly polarizing political commentator starting around 2015.
The shift was undeniable. His previous public profile, although sometimes eccentric, was broadly positive. But in 2015, he began writing blog posts that focused not on political policy, but on rhetoric.
Specifically predicting that Donald Trump had a 98% chance of winning the presidency.
And this analysis wasn't about polls or demographics. It was about dissecting Trump's communication methods through the lens of persuasion, which instantly garnered widespread media attention because it was such an unusual, non-traditional form of political analysis.
He viewed the election through a filter of psychological manipulation, arguing that Trump was a master hypnotist.
Exactly. He was analyzing politics not as a contest of facts, but as a contest of emotional framing and rhetorical skill.
And according to Adams himself, this public stance and subsequent endorsement of Trump came at a very high personal and professional cost.
He was very open about the consequences. He stated that his support for Trump negatively impacted his income, brought his lucrative public speaking career to an immediate end, and damaged many of his friendships.
He understood the trade-off inherent in moving from universal satire to partisan commentary.
He also publicly opposed Hillary Clinton's candidacy, citing a specific concern that her election would lower the status of men in America. This demonstrates the broad cultural and social scope he was projecting onto the political landscape.
And this new persona required a new platform, especially as the newspaper industry that supported Dilbert continued its decline. So in 2018, he launched a daily video presentation.
Real Coffee with Scott Adams.
The show was distributed across multiple platforms, Periscope, YouTube, and his own website, allowing him to bypass traditional media gatekeepers entirely.
The show quickly developed significant reach and influence. He hosted a wide array of high-profile guests, spanning finance, media, and politics. You had Naval Ravikant, Dave Rubin, Greg Gutfeld, Matt Gaetz, Bjorn Lomborg.
His impact wasn't just theoretical either. It reached the highest levels of digital interaction. In 2018, Kanye West shared multiple clips from an episode of Real Coffee
To his massive following, amplifying Adams' reach exponentially. And in 2020, President Trump himself retweeted an episode where Adams mocks Joe Biden.
That direct, high-level interaction cemented his new identity as a major digital political influencer, completely distinct from his career as a cartoonist.
And this transition was accelerated by real-world financial pressures.
Right. By 2020, Adams publicly acknowledged the writing on the wall for traditional print media.
He noted that he expected his Dilbert income to largely disappear in the next year as newspapers close up forever. He recognized this shift meant he needed a completely new business model.
He openly discussed that he was reinventing his life, and the local subscription platform became essential to his economic survival in the post-syndication world.
In this new role as political commentator, he became known for making high-profile, often hyperbolic predictions.
Many of which turned out to be inaccurate, landing him repeatedly on Politico's annual lists of worst predictions.
The predictions were certainly attention-grabbing. For instance, he incorrectly predicted that one of the major 2020 candidates, either Trump, Bernie Sanders, or Joe Biden, would die from COVID-19 by the end of that year.
Another prediction, reflecting the intense political climate of the time, was the highly charged claim that Republicans will be hunted if Joe Biden won the 2020 election.
And later, he predicted that the 2024 presidential election would result in a landslide of claims that the results were rigged, leading to the ultimate overturn of the results in Trump's favor by the Supreme Court.
His views on public health during the pandemic were equally polarizing.
He was openly anti-masking and anti-vaccine for COVID-19, asserting that, in his view, people who remained unvaccinated ultimately came out the best compared to the vaccinated population.
When looking at his commentary on social issues, we should note a highly grim 2022 opinion he offered regarding parents of troubled teenage boys. This came after a mass shooting.
He offered the opinion that society often leaves such parents with only two impossibly stark options: to either watch people die or murder their own son.
And the source material provides important context for this extreme viewpoint.
It does. Adams stated that his commentary was directly inspired by the tragedy of his own stepson, Justin, who died in 2018 at the age of 18 from a fentanyl overdose. This personal tragedy really underscores the severity of his viewpoint regarding societal failures.
We also have to address some older controversies that resurfaced during this period of high scrutiny. Back in 2006, he had posted a blog post questioning whether the official figures for Holocaust deaths were based on methodologically sound research.
And then, more recently in 2023, he suggested that the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, was actually an American intel op against Trump.
So these views consistently positioned him outside traditional consensus, marking a pattern of questioning established narratives.
And that pattern ultimately culminated in the massive professional crisis of 2023, the event that truly defined the end of his syndicated career.
This brings us to the specific events of February 2023. The turning point occurred during his Real Coffee live stream on February 22.
The discussion was driven by his reaction to a poll that asked respondents if they agreed with the phrase, "It's okay to be white."
And the specific data that Adams reacted to was that 26% of Black respondents disagreed with the statement and 21% were not sure.
Meaning nearly half of the Black respondents surveyed did not affirm the phrase.
And Adams's reaction to this data point was immediate and highly inflammatory.
He expressed frustration with the poll results, proceeded to describe Black people as a hate group, and advised white people to get the hell away from Black people. Just get the away.
The professional fallout was unprecedented in its speed and severity.
Dilbert was dropped by virtually every major newspaper that carried the strip across the country, including the Washington Post and the Los Angeles Times.
Essentially overnight.
The structural support for the strip just collapsed entirely. Andrews McNeil Syndication, his longtime distributor, severed all ties with Adams on February 27, 2023.
And then his book publisher, Portfolio, announced it was dropping his non-Dilbert book, which had been scheduled for release that September.
The financial impact was immediate and devastating. Adams himself noted that he lost approximately 80% of his income following the crisis.
His public defense was that his comments had been hyperbole, taken out of context by reporters, and that his main points were centered on promoting non-discrimination and advocating for risk avoidance.
Despite the complete loss of his traditional publishing and syndication deals, the comic strip itself did not vanish. He immediately pivoted to his subscription model.
Right. On March 13, 2023, Adams relaunched the comic strip as Dilbert Reborn on his subscription website, Locals.
This effectively transformed Dilbert from a globally syndicated strip into a webcomic, one whose continued existence was now entirely dependent on his direct subscriber base, lacking the back catalog of classic comics.
And it's important to note the specific themes he was already addressing in the strip that preceded this controversy. In September 2022, Dilbert had already begun a comic series that parodied ESG strategies.
Environmental, social, and corporate governance. Yes, ESG refers to a set of criteria used for socially conscious investing in corporate behavior.
And Adams' satire specifically targeted the application of diversity metrics within ESG.
That series included a plot line where a black character in the comic strip identified as white, followed by management asking if he could also identify as gay. This shows the strip was already engaging directly and controversially with complex cultural identity issues long before the February 2023 livestream.
Let's quickly circle back to another one of his entrepreneurial ventures that attracted its own share of negative media attention, WenHub.
WenHub was a co-founded service designed to be similar to Cameo, but focusing on live chats with various subject matter experts.
The controversy arose during the tragic 2019 Gilroy Garlic Festival shooting.
He posted a tweet in the immediate aftermath suggesting that witnesses of the mass shooting should download the WenHub app and set your price to take calls to monetize their perspective.
The media response was intensely negative, with many criticizing him for suggesting victims monetize their trauma.
He did eventually apologize for that particular message, calling it poorly worded. The attempt to merge a tragic news event with his entrepreneurial venture failed badly, and as of 2024, the WenHub website was reported as inactive.
Just to complete the personal timeline before we move into his final chapter, we should detail his marital life. He was married twice.
His first marriage was to Shelley Miles. They met at a gym and married in 2006, divorcing in 2014, but reportedly remaining friends. Adams became a stepfather to her two children, Savannah and Justin.
The latter being the stepson whose fentanyl overdose death in 2018 heavily influenced Adams's later commentary.
Right. His second marriage was to Christina Basham, a model and baker who also served as a vice president at WenHub. They became engaged in late 2019 and married in July 2020, but divorced 2 years later in March 2022.
And the sources note that Adams had no biological children but was a stepfather to 4 children across his 2 marriages.
Which brings us to the final, profoundly human and dramatic section of his life, a rapid period of health decline and mortality that began in 2025 and ended in January 2026.
The decline started with a stark public announcement on his Real Coffee show on May 19, 2025.
He revealed that he had been diagnosed with prostate cancer that had already spread to his bones, giving him a prognosis of having only a short time left to live.
In that announcement, he also detailed his attempts at self-treatment, noting that alternative therapies he pursued, specifically ivermectin and fenbendazole, did not work.
The progression of the metastatic disease was rapid and accompanied by immense physical pain.
And the immense pain pushed him to consider an option that speaks volumes about his suffering and his determination to maintain control.
He prepared for physician-assisted suicide under the California End-of-Life Option Act.
The planning was specific and deeply poignant. He had intended to go through with the procedure around June 29 or 30, deliberately planning to wait until after his stepdaughter's wedding had taken place.
To be in that level of pain, yet maintain the clarity to set such a critical, highly personal boundary is remarkable.
It makes the next piece of information all the more extraordinary. At the point where he had resigned himself to assisted suicide, there was an unexpected, potentially life-saving intervention.
An absolute moment of high drama and surprise. He discovered that taking common testosterone blocker pills, a standard treatment for prostate cancer, unexpectedly and dramatically eliminated his immense pain.
And furthermore, his prostate-specific antigen levels, a key indicator of the cancer's activity, dropped by a shocking 90%.
That is an astonishing reprieve from the brink. The unexpected effectiveness of the medication gave him a crucial, if temporary, extension of his life. A gift of weeks, months, or perhaps even some years.
But this reprieve was ultimately brief, and the rapid final decline resumed in late 2025, showing the relentless progression of the cancer.
By November 15, 2025, he had to make another major announcement. He would no longer be physically drawing the strip himself.
This was due to the return of focal dystonia in his right hand, exacerbated by his left hand becoming semi-paralyzed due to the cancer's spread.
Although he continued as the writer, his art director had to take over as the physical artist for the strip.
The cancer had spread further, reaching his spine, which left him with intense pain and forced him to use a walker for mobility.
It was during this period of extreme physical distress that he made a very public and desperate appeal on social media. He specifically reached out to former President Trump, asking for help to gain access to the cancer drug Pluvicto.
This public appeal gained significant attention and even prompted a response from Robert F. Kennedy, Jr.
By the following month, December 2025, his condition had deteriorated further. He reported that the cancer had caused paralysis below the waist, and he was undergoing radiation therapy to try and mitigate the damage.
His final communications with his audience were somber and incredibly candid, delivered right at the start of the new year. On January 1st, 2026, he reported on his show that his conversation with his radiologist had yielded all bad news.
He confirmed that there was no chance he would regain feeling in his legs, and, compounding the crisis, he was also experiencing ongoing heart failure.
He warned his devoted viewers that they should prepare themselves, suggesting that January would likely be a month of transition one way or another.
Scott Raymond Adams died just under 2 weeks later, on January 13, 2026, at the age of 68. He was under hospice care in Pleasanton, California, marking the end of a life defined by immense influence, persistent adaptation, and significant controversy.
To synthesize this incredible life, you have to consider the two starkly different careers he successfully built.
On one hand, he was a genuine management philosopher. He was recognized on the Thinkers 50 ranking multiple times and won the Orwell Award for his sharp dissection of corporate culture. He took white-collar satire global and defined the cubicle experience for a generation.
And on the other hand, his later life was spent operating as a high-stakes, highly controversial political commentator, trading his universal mainstream success for a platform defined by persuasion, prediction, and ultimately exclusion from traditional media.
He lived out the power and the peril of moving from broad, common ground satire to deeply partisan commentary.
When we look back at the most surprising nuggets from his journey, the fact that he started his managerial path only because he was held up at gunpoint twice as a bank teller,
the spectacular gastrointestinal failure of the Dilbert, designed to be the blue jeans of food.
His deep conviction in the power of writing down affirmations 15 times a day to control his destiny.
And the extraordinary human drama of his final year, planning for assisted suicide, only to receive that brief, unexpected medical reprieve, which reveals a person constantly innovating, adapting, and always believing in his ability to frame reality.
And that belief in persuasion is the ultimate thread connecting the early self-help enthusiast to the later political analyst. Adams wrote extensively about influence in books like Win Bigly, emphasizing that facts often don't matter in the face of emotional argument.
Right.
So given his deep conviction in the power of that mass influence, how might those principles apply to the digital platforms he ultimately had to rely on after losing traditional syndication?
It invites you to consider how the mechanism of influence changes entirely when the traditional gatekeepers, newspapers, and publishers disappear. Adams mastered the traditional system, lost it due to his shift in focus, and then relied entirely on the direct-to-audience, algorithm-driven world of digital persuasion.
He was a master of both worlds, and his downfall was a direct result of the strategies he himself analyzed.
A profound connection between his theoretical work and his final professional reality. We hope this comprehensive review has been insightful.
Thanks for listening.